I asked ChatGPT to generate a contact form. Let's see what it is and if we can make it better. It generated this file for us. It is a simple HTML page with a header with some basic info, a body tag. We got some PHP logic over here, and we got the form itself. The form itself consists of a name, an email address, and a message and a submit button. And the action is contact form.php, which ChatGPT said has to be the name of the file. And it uses a method of post. Let's see what it does. It checks if the submit is posted. If that is the case, it gets all the fields. It escapes them with a trim and a HTML special chars. It sets some basic information, sets the headers with the email address from the user, creates a body with the name, the email address, and the message. It sends the mail, and if this is successful, it prints a p tag with the thank you for contacting us and the name again. And if it fails, it says, oops, something went wrong. So this is a pretty good basic contact form. It does send a mail, it does get the name and the email address and a message of the user, and it does it all in one file. I like that it marks some fields as required, and it uses the proper input types, a type email and a type text, and we got a text area and a type submit. This way the browser can also help you verify the information. So the email, it will say it has to have an @ sign, and the message in text area is a big message, so it can have multiple rows. I think the escaping can be a lot better. It's only a trim and HTML chars. However, PHP has some built-in functions that can help us here. I don't like that the logic is inside the file itself. I would love to see it in another file. Maybe use some Ajax to do the call asynchronously. It uses the default built-in mail function, which is logical, but there are a lot of better packages for sending mail. I think of PHPMailer, for example. I think the error handling is also a little bit lax. It does not check if the fields are set. It requires solely on this required. And if email is not a valid email, for example, the from header does not work correctly anymore. So let's try and fix some of these things. The first thing I want to do is strip the logic from the main file and put it in a separate file. Let's create a new file and let's call it processform.php and just paste it all in right here. Save it and go back. Next, we need to add some JavaScript logic to asynchronously call this form and get the feedback from it. Let's just to speed it up add jQuery in the mix, and let's add our script file.js. Let's create this real quick. Okay, first let's create a document already, and inside of that let's start our contact form, and on submit execute a function. We need to prevent the default, so it does not trigger its own submission, but it says we do the logic for the submission of the form. Let's serialize the data, all the data fields of this form, which is actually the form itself. Next, let's create a new Ajax request with as type post, and the URL is our processform.php, the file we just made with all the logic inside of it. Let's add the data fields and create a new succession function. Inside this function, let's start the div, which will have all the results of the form, and a new error function, which will do the same but have a standardized message with an error is happened. Next, let's go back to the index itself and create the div we want to have the results of the page. And now we have a working Ajax contact form. Next, I want to fix the sanitation of the input fields. Now it does trim and it does check for the HTML chars, which is good, but it will fail if these fields are empty. It should not happen because the fields are required. However, if something went wrong and something comes through, we get a PHP error. So let's replace all these things with filter input vars. It takes the input of the post and the name of the variable, and then we'll pass it in the trim and the special chars function. We can do one more thing. We can check if the email address really is the email address by passing through the filter validate email constant to the filter input vars. Let's also add some if statements to check if the fields are set correctly or not. If not, echo a message for the user and return the function. Let's add them for email as well, and let's add them for message. Great. We can also, by the way, remove these p tags because we're echoing directly into a div right now, so we don't need them anymore. So next, let's change how it sends the email, because right now it's using the default mail function of PHP, which is not really incorrect, but it lacks a lot of features and we cannot combine it with any mail clients or mail servers or anything like that. So let's import a very easy package to work with mailing. Let's open up a terminal and use Composer to require the PHPMailer package. And let's wait for this to install. Now we can require the auto load from the Composer package at the top of the page, and then we can start working with PHPMailer. Let's first create a new instance of PHPMailer by saying mail equals new PHPMailer, and there the PHPMailer class. Then let's simulate connecting to an SMTP server, saying it's SMTP auth is true, and then we're gonna need our host username and password for sending secure mail. For the security, we say TLS, and we give it a port which is compatible with TLS. Next, we can set the from the email, and we again use the email and the name of the person sending us the mail via the contact form. Then we can get an address to send to. This will be our own address. Create a new subject and build a body in the same way as the ChatGPT-generated response was. Then we can replace the mail call just with a simple send, and it will handle in the same way. If this is true, we know the email has been sent and it says thank you. Otherwise, it will say something went wrong. Next, we're gonna have a little bit of fun, I think, and we're gonna protect the form for cross-site request forgery. This is where hackers will try to make the user perform an action without the user actually knowing it. And we can simply combat this by setting some variable in the session key and sending it with the form. First, let's create a PHP block. Inside of that, let's start a new session and create a CSRF token. This can be just a random string of bytes. Next, we need to send this with the form itself. So we're gonna put it in here and say input type hidden so the user cannot see it. Give it a name, the CSRF token. And let's echo the CSRF token inside of this. Next, let's check on the process form side of things. We're gonna start a session right here and create a little if statement which checks if this token is set and if the token is equal to our token in our session data itself. If this is not the case for any of them, this is all we need to do to prevent these types of attacks. A really bit of an overkill for a contact form, but fun to see how it works. All in all, I think ChatGPT generated a pretty decent contact form. It has some good HTML structures, have some good text, some good names. It did some validation. We spiced up a little bit. We checked for better email verification. We gave some better error messages for specific fields if they were not set or not correct. We also added some extra protection, and we made it with a different mail client, which is more robust and more easy to work with. And we also stripped the function of the script to a different script and called it with an asynchronous Ajax calls, which is just a better experience for the user, I think. Well, this is it. For any questions, leave them in the comments below. Bye.